All right, so I'm going to talk about sugar with you guys, and I think this is a hugely important topic because, like I said, we want to enjoy the good things that God gave us, but we don't want anything to become an idol. We don't want anything to destroy us. We don't want anything to be exalted over the God who created us. And food is one thing that is exalted over God that nobody talks about, that the church doesn't talk about, and I could probably argue that it's the most destructive force in the church today and killing the most people and bringing the most people short of the fullness of their calling and their lives. Who's dying of old age today? People are dying of sickness and disease. So I kind of laid the hammer right on the first sentence, but I want to preach the truth to you guys. You know, just like the Zadok priesthood, they gave the truth to the people. And so again, we want you to understand the good things of God, but we don't want it to hinder your walk with God. Does that make sense? Okay, so the first thing is that God gave us sweet, right? We have a sweet taste bud in our mouth. We have other taste buds in our mouth. Did you guys know that? Not just sweet? I'm joking. But there's bitter, and there's sour, and there's pungent, and there's salty, and there's taste. Like God's a God of taste and design, and we're designed in His image. So there's something important about the sweet taste. And there's nothing wrong with sweet things. And God gave us sweet things, but we have to choose the right things. And just like with anything, the enemy takes the good things of God and twists them to destroy mankind, right? And that's what he's done with sweet, and that's what he's done with food. And so we want to understand that so that we don't fall victim to what the enemy is doing. We want to walk in alignment with what God gave us and how we're supposed to live based on God's creation and design. So I'm going to give you 3 scriptures. I was just praying about this morning. I'm like, Lord, give me some scriptures. And so I'm going to give you 3 references out of hundreds related to health and nutrition and sweet. And if you look in the Bible, they talk about sweet. He talks about bitter. Jeremiah talks a lot about bitter. All these tastes and different things are discussed in the Bible. But the first thing I want to bring up, I think that the Lord highlighted to me, was the Nazarite vow, which is in Numbers 6. And one of the 3 main stipulations of the Nazarite vow was that they would choose nothing of the grape or anything associated with grapes. And the reason that was part of the Nazarite vow back then is because the grape was their sweet. They didn't have processed food. They didn't have big factories making all this white flour, white sugar, all this stuff. Their sweet was mainly grapes and raisins and raisin cakes and wine and right? I mean, it was things of the grape that were the sweet things. And so when somebody made a Nazarite vow, it wasn't because grapes are bad, evil things, right? God created grapes. Grapes aren't bad. You know, wine isn't necessarily bad if we're not using it to excess and causing drunkenness, right? We know that. So the reason they gave up the grapes was they were saying that I will give up the good things of the world, even the good things of the world that God gave us, in pursuit of you, over even good things of the world. And so that's what I want people to understand, is when we're changing our ways from eating processed sugar and eating healthier sugars, or even to abstaining at all from sugar, it's because we're choosing that God is more important than food, that God is more important than sweet things. And so I just want to make that clear, because it wasn't a legalistic thing. You know, we can get legalistic when it comes to vows and avoiding certain things and this and that. It's a heart posture. And what they were doing with the Nazarite vow is making a heart posture that for a specific period of time, I'm going to give up even good things that you made, God, because I want to focus my eyes fully on you and you alone. Does that make sense? Okay, the second thing, I'm going to give you a Psalm 119, 103. Which says, how sweet are your words to my taste, yes, sweeter than honey to my mouth. And so again, you know, God gave us sweet. This is David, right? He's the psalmist. He clearly knew what honey was. He clearly knew what sweet things were. But he also made it clear to share with us that the words of God are sweeter to him than honey in his mouth. And so I want us to have that perspective too. When we're going to holiday functions or birthday parties or whatever the event is, we're all guilty of this. I mean, my whole life I couldn't wait to go to XYZ event or Christmas. Why? Because of the food. It was about the food. It's about the sweets. You know, the 5-year-old kid can't wait till his birthday party because he knows he's going to get cupcakes and muffins and who knows what else. So, again, what's our perspective on what's important in this world? Food is important for fellowship, for communion, for getting together. But is your first focus God? Is your first focus your friends, your family, fellowship, loving your neighbors and your fellow friends? I can't wait to talk to my aunt who doesn't know the truth about Jesus Christ, and it's an opportunity for me to talk to her and share her the truth. Or is it like, I just can't wait to go eat? And you stuff yourself so full, and then you can barely move or walk, and then you can't talk to anybody because you just want to sit in front of the TV and zone out after the meal. Like, we've all done it. We've all done it. Well, maybe not all of us. I know I have many times. So again, I'm just sharing with you that, it's okay to have sweet things, but they can't exalt God's purposes for us in our lives. And that's unfortunately what's happened in food with a lot of us. The final scripture I'm going to give you is in Proverbs. And it says a sated man, which would be like a satiated man, or like a fully, a fully satisfied man or woman, person. A sated man loathes honey, but a famished man, any bitter thing is sweet. So who here knows what it's like to starve? We don't know what it's like to be hungry. We don't really. We're driven by appetite. And so we're so into the good things of this world that we don't know what it's like to have need or to be hungry or to be starving. And so for a person who's truly hungry, it doesn't matter what they eat. They're not going to the store to buy the sweetest, most perfect thing that tastes the absolute best. They're just wanting to eat. And so again, I think that's important perspective to have, that we're so focused on everything having this perfect taste and flavor and sweetness and all that, when, again, that's not the most important thing in life.
Proverbs what? Which proverb?
I didn't write down the scripture on that Proverbs one, but you can look it up. I don't remember. But a sated man loathes honey, but to a famished man, any bitter thing is sweet. So in other words, if you're truly hungry, all things will taste good to you. Bitter things will taste good to you. You'll have a wide palate and a range of tasteful things. If all you can think about and all you want is sweet, there's something wrong. There's something wrong in your body physically. There might be something wrong emotionally, because a lot of times we eat for emotional fulfillment. And so we just really want to check our hearts when it comes to food and what we're doing, and what is the reason why we're doing the things we're doing. Are we eating to honor God, or are we eating to just please ourselves? Because the goal is to serve and love other people, and so many people have eaten themselves into a position, they cannot serve God. They cannot serve other people. They're reliant on doctors and medicine and hospitals and hospital bills and pharmaceutical drugs, and they can hardly walk and move. It was not God's purpose or intention for any of us. And the reason I'm sharing that with you is because I think one of the biggest downfalls to people is sweet. It's that sweet taste. But again, it's not supposed to be bad or wicked or evil, or because God gave that to us. But it's supposed to be enjoyed in alignment with God's heart. Is that fair? Okay, so reasons man-made processed sugar has ruined our health. I'm going to reference Weston A. Price, Dr. Royal Lee, Dr. Francis Pottinger, because these were three guys back in the 1930s, in the beginning of us processing our food. In other words, taking the original things God made and running them through machines to concentrate them or to strip nutrients out of them to increase shelf life so things didn't spoil. And at that time, they saw the degeneration happening in the 30s. Children born weaker, children born with misshapen jawlines and narrowing hips of women. They saw this taking place in the 30s, and they wrote books and books and books about it. I mean, Dr. Royal Lee wrote a book this thick Weston A. Price wrote a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration in the 30s. That if we continue to eat these devitalized processed foods, we will destroy ourselves. And that's what's happened. And it's no better now than it was then. In fact, it's worse now than it was then because we're so driven by taste. And again, if you want to look at it from a biblical standpoint, we're driven by our flesh. That's why God calls us to fast. If you fast and pray, you turn away from things of the flesh and you focus on the Spirit of God, the Spirit of God that's in you. But there's a lot of things that interfere with connecting with God. And believe it or not, food is one of those. And again, we just don't talk about it a lot. If you want to know your weaknesses, if you want to know how hooked you may or may not really be on sugar, fast. Don't eat it for a week. Don't eat it for a month. Don't eat it for 3 months. You know, if you really want to find out your weaknesses, if you really want to find out if something is an idol, you just fast from it. Whether it's Facebook or TV or whatever it is. But that's why God called us to fast. Because fasting turns us away from things of the world. Okay? So, those guys knew in the 30s that we were on a path towards destruction. And I've talked about it in my classes many times, that sickness and disease mainly, I don't want to say 100% of the time, but mainly is a misalignment with how God designed our bodies to function. And so, heavy, processed foods weren't designed by God to go in the human body. Even natural, healthy sweeteners weren't designed to be stuck in a gallon jar so you can go to the grocery store 24/7, grab it, and start glugging it into stuff. That's not normal. It's not natural. It never has been. Because if you lived based off God's design, you would only mainly have what for your sweet? Fruit? Honey? That's about it, right? Unless you happen to have maple trees and happen to know how to tap one and boil it and do all that, or you happen to have sugar cane, but that only grows in tropical regions. So why are we going to the grocery stores and buying bags of it? Because we can. Because of modern transportation. But I just want people to understand that it's not just about eating the healthier sugar.
The organic bag of sugar.
It's organic. Good. You know? I mean, that's the joke, right?
Yeah.
It's still concentrated. It's not in God's original form. It was never designed to go in the human body in that capacity. That's why it causes dysfunction. That's why it causes diabetes. That's why it causes arthritis. That's why it causes heart disease. And you can just go on down the list. We give these diseases to ourselves. We want to believe that it's something that we don't understand, or does genetics play a role? Sure it does. People are born weak, and we see that in our children today. But God is still God. He's the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. You can change and heal your body anytime because the power of the living God that's in us is a body that's designed as a self-healing mechanism. My joke is that all we got to do is get out of the way. If we can get out of the way of God, we'll fully heal and we'll fully regenerate. It doesn't matter if you have 4-stage cancer. You can heal from it, but you've got to get out of the way of interfering with the way God designed your body to function. And sugar is one of the biggest things that interferes with the way God designed our body to function. Okay? So I wanted to stress that point that God has given us everything we need to satisfy our sweet in a healthy way. Fruit, mainly. Stevia is a sweet plant that God gave us that we grow stevia in our garden. You can pick it, you can chew the leaf, and it just happens to be sweet. It's a plant that God gave us. Am I running out of time?
No, you're poking me in the eye.
Okay. I'm very animated. And honey. Those are the main things that we have, at our discretion, at our beck and call in a normal environment, if you're willing to fight off the bees and get honey, right? We did use maple syrup in quite a few of our things because it is a decent choice, and it is a very natural sweetener. But again, you can overdo anything. So, let's see, what did I not cover? Because I just kind of went off there.
It's okay. I think mainly just talking about the different concentrated forms and then giving them options. And then in fact, this is a good segue. Just if you look at your notes, you have a sheet that says a spectrum of whole food choices. And this is something I've been passing out the last few food classes, but it's like every time we do a food class, I keep going back to this chart because I keep feeling like it summarizes everything I want to say. So we have on the left-hand column, if you look at your spectrum here, you have dairy, grains, meat, fat, and sugar. And today we're really highlighting sugar, but we've used this whole chart in other classes that we've talked. And I just wanted to give you kind of a spectrum of like, no, you can stay. We'll wrap up in just a second, and then I'll start the sugars part. The left side of the column is the worst, and this would be everything processed and man-made. And so you've got your artificial sweeteners, you've got your genetically modified hydrogenated oils, your deep fried foods, your grain-fed hormone-filled meats, and then in sugar, mainly, you're going to have anything that's refined to the point of high concentration and is stripped of all minerals and everything, which would be your white and brown sugar, artificial sweeteners, and especially high fructose corn syrup, which I think a lot of people are aware of now is just extremely dangerous.
And now they call it corn syrup. They don't call it high fructose corn syrup. And there are hidden names for it so that you don't know what it is. So that's why you have to be cautious with packaged foods.
And then going to the right, you have a better option, which would be Rapadura is just basically like cane sugar. And the problem is, though, it's still very concentrated. So you're going to buy a bag of organic cane sugar, and if you just use it, liberally, you're still really putting burden on the body. Agave is processed in a way that it's pretty concentrated as well, although it's been touted as a health one, we actually do avoid that. Palm sugar is a little concentrated, although it's natural.
And cane sugar should be on that list. Rapadura is a type of cane sugar.
And so going to the right, we have the honey, maple syrup, and molasses would be kind of a nice, better option. And that's what we tend to, so this column here is where I tend to go to for celebrations. Mm-hmm. For my daughter's birthday, I'm going to use maple syrup and honey in her cupcakes, or, Christmas time, I'm going to go for those. Because to me, it's a one-time thing. It's not something we're going to eat throughout the week. It's a one-day meal. It's a celebration. I'm going to enjoy it with my family. And then for us, we live pretty much on the right-hand column. We just do fruit and stevia. We really don't do honey at all. Mm-hmm. I mostly sweeten with fruit. So bananas, dates is a fruit. I try not to do too much dried fruit. So I just wanted to give you a spectrum, and you can look at the other categories as well.
If it's okay, let me share two things with you guys, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jen, okay? One is I want people to understand why, let me start with this, why our world today is different than it used to be. I kind of mentioned that God created and designed things a certain way. One of my jokes is if you ever look at sugar cane, it's like a stick, okay? You can't overeat a stick, but you can run it through a machine, concentrate it down into a bag that big, and put cups into it. So again, not normal, right? But the other things that aren't normal about our society today is the 24/7, the transportation system, shipping stuff overseas, and so we have it in mass quantities. Our lifestyles aren't normal. The example I love to give people is Little House on the Prairie. Okay? Charles Ingalls, he went out in the morning, and from sun up to sundown, that guy worked his patootie off, right? He was doing a roof for this guy, and then he had to plow the field, and then he had to help this guy build a barn, and life was hard back then. And when he got home, and what was his wife? Carolyn, made a meal for him, and part of that meal was an apple pie. Not a big deal, because one, things weren't as processed back then, and two, Charles just burned I don't know how many calories. It's not about calories, but he's sweating and he's working his butt off. Okay, now we're mainly sedentary. We're lucky to find 30 minutes to go work out. We don't live on farms. We don't live active lifestyles. We're not moving our lymph and our body and our digestion, and the metabolism is dropping because we're so sedentary. And on top of it, we're eating gobs and piles of white sugar and white flour and all this stuff. So our lifestyles are different. And the example I give people is when I don't love the idea of zoos and what they do to animals. However, you don't take a lion out of the wild and put him in a zoo and be like, well, Doritos and Pop-Tarts are cheap, let's just give him those. You just killed the lion. And why? Because God didn't design a lion to eat those foods. You know what? God didn't design you to eat those foods either. And if you eat those foods, you're destroying the temple. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Not a fun chapter. I don't hear a lot of people preach on it, but read 1 Corinthians 3:16. God says if anyone's going to destroy the temple, he'll destroy them. So this is really serious stuff to God, like what we eat and how we treat our bodies. And we don't do it to our plants. You don't put diet soda on your plant and expect it to live. You kill the plant. So we can't put these things in our bodies and expect great health and longevity and freedom from sickness and disease. So I hope I stressed that enough. And the last point I just want to make is that different sugars work differently in the body. And I think this is really important for people to understand. Fruit is a simple sugar. Okay? When it goes into the body, it's easily assimilated. It's energy to the cells. It's quick in, it's quick out. There's nutrients in it. And that's a great way to get fuel and energy. And a lot of people just fast on fruit. We've had a lot of people do fruit fasts and get great healings in their bodies. Okay, it's a simple sugar. It's not as hard on the body. When you get into even natural sweeteners, honey, maple syrup, agave, and then when you get into all the grains, okay, all the breads and the pastas and the pizza and the crackers and the wheat and all that stuff, those are all complex sugars. So a simple sugar is a monosaccharide, one sugar molecule, versus a disaccharide, which is a multiple sugar molecule. When you put that in your body, it's harder on digestion. It requires an insulin response from the pancreas. It creates a lot of acidic waste byproduct that needs to be eliminated by your kidneys, and people have a lot of acid waste built up in their bodies, and their kidneys aren't working, and their lymphs congested. So this is not like a gluten thing. Oh, gluten-free, that's the answer to everything, okay? That, my gosh, that started in the 50s. That's a marketing thing more than anything. But grains and complex sugars are a problem because of the nature of the effort it takes for the body to break down, digest, and process them. That's why we encourage fruit over all of that stuff. If you're a diabetic, you're going to heal faster eating whole fruit if you stay away from all the breads and the pastas. And the American Diabetes Association tells you the opposite. Well, eat your bread, but make sure it's whole grain and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you want to be a diabetic the rest of your life? Follow the recommendations of the American Diabetes Association. Because that's what they want. They want you to be on their medication and be sick for your entire life. Yep. Sorry I threw that in there, but I'll end on that note. Okay, honey, there you go. Turn it over to you. Yes. Yes.